This episode of the Creep Street Podcast is brought to you by Martini Coffee Roasters. You know, people always look at me weird when I say I start off every morning with a big old martini. But then I set them straight, and I tell them I'm talking about Martini Coffee Roasters coffee. A delicious coffee made by the Martini family. They roast their coffee using a traditional method of sight and sound to roast those little babies to perfection. And they also sell green coffee beans for those home roasters out there. And right now, fans of the Creep Street Podcast can get 20% off their entire order by using the code CREEPSTREET at martinicoffee.com. Once again, for 20% off your order, use the code CREEPSTREET at martinicoffee.com. Martini Coffee Roasters, the perfect coffee to keep you creeps caffeinated.
You've taken a wrong turn down Creep Street.
Citizens of the Milky Way, my name is Dylan Hackworth.
This is Maureen Bogey.
And you have arrived at the Creep Street Podcast. Welcome, one and all.
Hello, everybody.
Ooh, we are ready to dance with death today, are we not?
We sure are.
Of course, follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Creep Street Podcast, Twitter at Creep Street Pod. We're also on TikTok. On our Facebook is another forum where daily we like to chat with our listeners. The listeners post memes, funny stories, or personal stories. We also like to divulge what the next week's episode will be before the wider public knows it. If you want to be a part of that, anyone can be. It's free. Just go to Facebook and find Citizens of the Milky Way, a Creep Street fan page, and hit the Let Me In button, and one of us will let you in. And of course, if once a week is not enough...
And let's be real. It's just not enough.
Ooh, let me tell you something. There ain't no gift in Santa's sleigh, in Santa's bag of goodies, that's as good as what's hanging out over on patreon.com/creepstreetpodcast.
That's right.
Go there, find your tier level. There's 3 different tiers. Find the one that's right for you and get all sorts of goodies, bonus episodes, movie commentaries, discussions, short stories. It's a hell of a good time.
It really is.
And of course, the holiday season is upon us.
It is.
Which means it's almost time for Volume 5 of Listener Stories.
We need your personal accounts, your spooky, scary personal stories. We need to hear them.
These may be encounters with the paranormal, hauntings, or it might be UFOs, brushes with serial killers. I don't know, just creepy things that have happened. We would love to hear them.
We would love to hear all about it.
Local lore from your hometown, whatever. We cannot wait to share those. Now,
You can get those to us by reaching out to us on any of our socials, send us a sweet DM, or you can email us at creepstreetpodcast@gmail.com.
Now, last week we gave them the Los Feliz murder house.
That's right.
People really popped for it.
Yeah, it was a big one, and we're so happy you all enjoyed it.
And it's a holiday weekend this week here in the good old US of A.
That's right.
And so we wanted to treat you to a classic, one that is universal across all mythologies. It may look a little different. It may have a different name.
Right.
But at the end of the day, it's there to do one thing, baby. Maureen, what are we talking about this week?
Today, we will be talking about the Grim Reaper.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, that's big league.
That sure is big league stuff right there. I mean, we're really excited to go into this topic. We just thought, let's do a big topic for today, kind
Absolutely.
of a classic topic. We've all heard of the Grim Reaper. We've all, seen images of the Grim Reaper in movies and TV shows and books and art and all sorts of things. And we just thought, you know what, now's the time.
That's right. It's a star.
Oh, yeah.
The Grim Reaper is a star. It's got cachet. It's got star power. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
It's got box office pull.
It's a big guy. Big guy. So here are my sources for today's episode. One is an article titled Bizarre Real Encounters with the Grim Reaper by Brent Swanser at Mysterious Universe. Then we have The History of the Grim Reaper and Deities Around the World by Mythology and Fiction Explained, a great YouTube video. Then we have the YouTube video The Macabre Origins of the Grim Reaper by Dr. Emily Zarka at Monstrum. Then we have the video Grim Reaper, Deathbed Visitations and the Angel of Death by the Paranormal Scholar. And finally, a video called Psychopomps, the Grim Reaper and Other Messengers of Death by Mythology Unleashed.
Ooh.
Spooky.
Hope that chill I feel is just the crisp late autumn air.
Partially, but partially, maybe it could be something a little spookier.
I think so.
Uh-oh, we're having fun. So the Grim Reaper is sometimes also called the Angel of Death. And the Grim Reaper is usually seen wearing a long black cloak, holding a scythe, and you either can't really see the body or the face under the cloak, or it's a skeletal humanoid creature. Now let's go a little bit back into the origins of this guy.
Please.
Back in the Ding Dong Day, we're talking, pre-Renaissance time. In Europe, there was a very popular story of 3 finely dressed men riding through the woods for them to come upon 3 animated corpses that could possibly be their ancestors or maybe even themselves.
Uh-oh.
These 3 animated corpses told them about the fleetingness of life, the grossness of death, and the need to repent and to lead a more righteous life. So that's kind of the start of this whole kind of animated corpse, skeletal figure thing kind of coming forth to talk about death to the living.
Interesting. Interesting indeed. The grossness of death.
Yeah.
Gross.
Yes.
Death is gross.
Oh, good. But one major thing that really, really influenced the Grim Reaper has got to be the bubonic plague.
Oh, yeah. Ever heard of it?
Ever heard of it, you fucking freaks? Anywhere from 20 to 75% of the global population died from the bubonic plague, the Black Death, the Black Plague, whatever you want to call it.
It was a nasty one.
And I know that's a huge range, 20 to 75%, but there wasn't great record keeping. It was just kind of a mess back in the day, you know?
Right, of course.
But regardless of the exact percentage, it was a great number of people. And I mean great like a lot, not great like very chill.
Right.
And since death was just knocking on everyone's ding-dang door, people needed a way to cope with death. And death just being this indiscriminate, faceless force that would come for everyone increasingly quickly and with abandon was scary.
Absolutely.
So kind of creating death into a more personified human type figure was kind of a way to cope with death and make death a little bit more understandable, a little bit more relatable.
Absolutely. You give it a face.
Mm-hmm. You give it a face, you give it a name. Now, death or the Grim Reaper, it wasn't really the Grim Reaper yet, it was really just death at this point, was depicted as being either male or female depending on the location and the exact time period. For example, in Poland, death was an elderly woman in white robes.
Interesting.
So there you have it. Now, some big influences for what would become the Grim Reaper were a few Greek gods. There was Thanatos, who is the winged Greek personification of non-violent death. Thanatos is always male and carries away the dead, which is a little bit different. Like Thanatos would just carry away the dead, whereas the Grim Reaper kind of was more like forcefully claiming the deceased.
Right. The Thanatos was more of like a street sweeper.
I guess.
He was cleaning up the place, whereas the Grim Reaper, he has a scythe, which implies he's harvesting.
Oh, there you go.
You know what I mean?
Uh-huh. True.
It was an old farming tool. You
Right.
know? You cut your I don't know, whatever your
Corn.
crop is. Your corn, your barley, your hay, whatever. So, I mean, yeah, I guess you're right. It would naturally imply that he or she or whatever, it's there to harvest.
Yes. Now there's also Heranos. Now, Heranos was the male Greek god of time, who is often confused with Kronos, who is the ancient Greek god connected with agriculture, who is portrayed as an old man with a beard and a sickle in hand. Now, all of the similarities of the gods, along with the natural associations with the harvest and the changing of the seasons and the end of the year, kind of all aligned all of these things with death. Now, the Renaissance artists and painters and whatnot, they were friggin' obsessed with the Greeks. They loved this stuff. Can you blame them?
Can you blame them?
I love a good Greek cuisine.
There you go.
And I love, mythology is cool.
There you go.
And the friggin' Renaissance artists felt the same. They were like, yes, when we are gonna be depicting / personifying death, we're kind of gonna go towards these images, these ideas of these different gods to help us personify death in our own way. However, the sickle that has been used multiple times here was then changed to a more efficient scythe.
Okay, right.
So in the early 14th century, scythes became more popular in Europe for corn harvesting, okay? But because of the strength and height that someone needed to have to be able to really use a scythe, it became thought of as a more masculine object.
Oh, because I was going to say, because death, it's a concept. It doesn't really have a, you know what I mean?
Right.
That's interesting. Why it then took on a more masculine ideal.
Right. And people who used sickles, which are the more like handheld version of a scythe, were called reapers. And those who used scythes were called mowers. So the Grim Reaper should actually be called the Grim Mower.
But doesn't quite have the ring to it.
You gotta do what works best. You gotta think of marketing. You got to think of the bottom line.
If there's anything the Reaper has done, it's done very well at marketing.
Yes. I mean, how many t-shirts have we seen?
Don't fear the Reaper, baby.
Don't fear the mower. See, it just doesn't work.
Doesn't work.
Come
on, baby, don't fear the mower. Can't copyright hit me.
You can't. We changed it. So don't at me.
Blue Oyster Cult.
We know you're listening.
We know that this podcast is a favorite amongst fans of and the band themselves, Blue Oyster Cult.
That's right. And the scythe was much more efficient than a sickle, so they were able to mow down great numbers of crops, similar to how the Black Plague was mowing down great numbers of people in death. But it's interesting, though, because as time went on, death also became kind of a symbol of compassion and also a way to welcome someone into the afterlife, kind of comfort and relief and acceptance.
Okay, interesting.
But the thing is, it wasn't called the Grim Reaper until hundreds of years after the fact, after the Black Death. The word grim started being used in the late 10th century, meaning fierce, cruel, savage, harsh, or fiercely angry. But the word Grim Reaper, or the term Grim Reaper together, was first written down in 1847 in the Circle of Human Life, which was a partial translation of a German devotional text in 1841 that tracks the life of a Christian. So the Grim Reaper has been used in imagery ever since then. Famously, in 1987, Australia used the cloaked figure to raise awareness about AIDS, and many cartoonists and others have used the Grim Reaper in connection to COVID-19.
Oh, wow, okay.
That's right. Now, we have a little bit of a story here. We got this from Mysterious Universe, but they got it from Ranker.com. Here is a very quick story about someone possibly seeing the Grim Reaper for themselves. This story comes from someone who was in a hospital themselves and was sharing a room with someone.
Oh, okay.
I was awakened by a voice in my room. It was a woman's voice, but I couldn't make out what she was saying. I opened my eyes and there was no one in the room, just me and my roommate, who was incoherent the entire time we shared our room. Assuming it was a nurse in the hall, I tried falling back asleep. Suddenly, there was a loud, frantic voice shouting, "No, you can't take me. I won't go." I opened my eyes again, and the room was much, much darker. And my roommate was sitting straight up in her bed, screaming with complete and utter conviction towards the foot of her bed, almost like a child objecting to bedtime. She was crying, still sitting up, looking at something, listening very intently for what seemed like forever. She began to whisper, yes and no, between whimpers, and then she laid back down, and I watched the darkness leave the room.
Wow.
Yeah.
Very freaky, okay.
Very freaky stuff. Now, there are some other images of death that are not exactly the Grim Reaper, but are very similar to the Grim Reaper. And here are a couple of them now. In Norway, there is the Plague Hag, aka Pesta, and she wears a black hood and a dark red skirt and carries a rake. She goes from farm to farm spreading disease. And if you come across her in your village with a rake, some people will survive. However, if you come across her sweeping her broom, the whole village is doomed. And she traveled by boat, which is interesting because that is how the Black Plague is thought to have been spread, by rat-infested boats.
Yes, absolutely.
There is also Anku, who is a figure that is from mainly Wales and Ireland, but all over the British Isles. Sometimes Anku appears like a shadow, and other times he appears very similar to the Grim Reaper. A skeleton in black robes with a hat that covers most of his face and wielding a scythe. The Anku drives a carriage with black horses and guides souls to the afterlife, hoping that his own debt would be paid and that then he would be able to pass over himself to the afterlife. He was charged with looking over graveyards and helping people pass on. Each parish would have their own Anku, and the last person or the first person to die from each parish would be selected to be the next Anku. Now there was also Santa Muerte, who is a colorful female version of the Grim Reaper who has much more recently come into play. She is almost worshipped herself in Mexico and is a celebratory figure. However, the Catholic Church has come forward and said they are not really okay with it.
Okay, interesting.
So it's kind of its own thing at this point. Now, this is a little unclear here, whether or not this is fully quote-unquote canon with Islam, or if just some people believe this and some people don't believe this, or if this is kind of up for debate. It was kind of interesting. It came up in a bunch of my sources, but I didn't see it in the Quran itself. So take this as you will. However, there seems to be the angel of death in Islam called Azrael, and he is of great and noble power, chosen by God to command lesser-ranking angels to pull souls out of their bodies and transporting them to the afterlife. But these figures and the Grim Reaper aren't the only ones associated with kind of bringing the living over to the side of the dead. There's also psychopomps, which means guide of souls. And psychopomps make no decision of who should die or when, and they are sometimes depicted as animals, loved ones, monsters, or energies. In ancient Egypt, there was Anubis, the jackal-headed god. In ancient Greek, there was Heron, who was a psychopomp. He carried souls that had been given funeral rites across the river Styx, but if you could not afford his toll, you would be forced to wander the shores of the river Styx for 100 years before you were able to cross the river. In Inuit mythology, there is a guide called Nguta, who guides the souls of the living to the transitory realm where they prepare for their ascent to paradise. However, if you have sinned, you will be punished in order to repent before you can pass on.
Uh-oh.
Yes. There is also Pinga, who receives the souls of the newly deceased and prepares them for reincarnation. Shaman might be able to communicate or see with Pinga, and sometimes Pinga would actually send a spirit to talk with the shaman. In Chinese folk religion, there are two twin death deities, and one is all in black and one is all in white, and one has the meaning of definitely at peace, and the other one's meaning is cannot be helped. And depending on how the person lived their lives, one of the psychopomps would come to guide them to the underworld. For the Cree people of North America, the Aurora Borealis, aka the Northern Lights, is called Wawate, and it is composed of departed spirits of ancestors guiding the way to the afterlife. In Norse mythology, there are Valkyries who would descend upon battlefields to those who fought valiantly in war and brought them up to Valhalla with Odin or Falkvanir with Freya. In Vodou, there is Baron Samudi who awaits the deceased at the crossroads of life and death and brings the newly deceased into the afterlife. But Baron Samudi can restore health as well. And in Filipino culture, ancestors act as guides of souls. And that is kind of where we land on this topic today a lot.
Interesting. Is there guides?
Yes, like our passed on ancestors kind of act as psychopomps, act as guides to the other side. Now, there is a senior coordinator of bereavement services at a hospital in Florida with over 20 years experience. Miss Paulo, who says that deathbed visitations of loved ones passed on friends or family members is so common that she doesn't even think about it anymore.
Wow.
She said once she was caring for a woman at her home, at the woman's home, when, quote, about 5 days before her death, she reported seeing a man looking in her window. This was out in the country and we were concerned that it was a peeping Tom. But when the man came back, she told us it was her brother, who had died many years earlier. He's just waiting for me, she said. I'll go with him next time he comes.
Interesting.
Now, in 1977, a Dr. Carlos Osis, as well as some other PhDs, wrote a book called At the Hour of Death for the American Society of Psychical Research. They examined over 50,000 terminally ill people and interviewed more than 1,000 doctors and nurses, and they found that most people that had deathbed visitations were visited by people they knew rather than an angelic being or anything like that. They were described in believable terms, and they were said to be lucid at the time when they had this deathbed visitation. Pre-existing beliefs also did not play a role into whether or not they saw someone. And some research shows that nearly 76 of patients died within 10 minutes of their deathbed experience, and the remainder died within hours after that.
Very interesting.
Now, this research is hotly contested, but it is thought that by many people to be true. And even if it is not exactly true, this number isn't exactly what it, really is. I think it is interesting that there are so many deathbed visitations, and so many of them are from friends and family. I think it's kind of beautiful.
Wow. All right, Maureen, thank you so much for doing that research.
Of course. Thank you so much. We hope you enjoyed it. It's just a fun, interesting story of what is really going on with psychopomps and the Grim Reaper and all of these guys. And the Grim Reaper really is just a psychopomp himself, but it's a little bit different with the Grim Reaper because the Grim Reaper is kind of thought to be gathering the souls or actually committing the end of life.
Right.
But there you have it.
Yes. Now, this one's a little bit shorter because it's the holiday weekend.
Yes.
So we had a lot of stuff to do. So this one's a little bit shorter, but we hope you enjoy it.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, I got a list of names I wouldn't mind escorting me over the river Styx.
Okay, come on.
Folks, the names of our top-tier Patreon subscribers, of course, the Dream James Watkins, the Finished Face Via Lundqvist, the Madman Marcus Hall, the Vivacious Vicky McHugh, the Tenacious Teresa Hackworth, the Heartbreak Kid Chris Hackworth, the Oh-So-Suave Sean Richardson, the British Bonebreaker Bex Martin, the Notorious Nicholas Barker, the Terrifying Taylor Lashmet, the Count of Cool, Cameron Corliss, the Archduke of Attitude Adam Archer, the Sinister Sam Kiker, the Nightmare New Zealand Noeline Vivilli, the Loathsome Johnny Love, the Carnivorous Kevin Bogey, the Killer Stud Carl Staub, the Firestarter Heather Carter, the Conqueror Christopher Damian Damaris, the Awfully Awesome Annie, the Murderous Maggie Leach, the Sir of Sexy Sam Hackworth, the Evil Elizabeth Riley, Lauren Hellfire, Hernandez Lopez, the Maniacal Laura Maynard, the Vicious Karen Van Buren, the Arch Nemesis Aaron Bird, the Sadistic Sergio Castillo, the Rapscallion Ryan Crum, the Beast Benjamin Huang, the Devilish Chris Doucette, the Psycho Sam, the Electric Emily Zhang, the Ghoulish Gert Hankum, the Renegade Corey Ramos, the Crazed Carlos, and the antagonist Andrew Pye.
Thank you so much to our top tier Patreon subscribers. We are so thankful for you. Thank you to all of our Patreon subscribers, and thank you to every one of you for listening and being a member of the Creep Street Homeowners Association. It really means the world to have you all with us. We are so grateful for you. We are so thankful for you. Thank you for listening, and please spread the word.
Absolutely. Of course, like, rate, subscribe, hit us with 5 stars or a thumbs up on whatever outlet you listen to us on. And of course, if once a week is not enough, go to patreon.com/creepstreetpodcast for all sorts of goodies. Citizens of the Milky Way, my name is Dylan Hackworth.
I'm Maureen Bogey.
Good night and goodbye.
Goodbye.